Okay, this is lesson 9.2, equations and tables. So when an equation describes the relationship between two quantities, the variable x often represents the independent variable, and the variable y often represents the dependent variable. A value of the independent variable is called the input value, and a value of the dependent variable is called the output value. So I just kind of summed that up by putting x often represents the independent value, which is your input, and y often represents the dependent value, which is your output. So for example 1, a skating rink charges $3 for each hour of skating plus $1.75 to rent skates. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write an equation. So the total cost is how much?
$3.
It's $3 for each hour plus $1.75. So I need to write an equation for that. So instead of, you know how yesterday we were using C, we would use like C for the dependent variable. Today we're going to go ahead and use Y as that dependent variable. So Y will be the one that's by itself. So Y equals, we'd say $3 for each hour. So that means what am I going to use for this part right here? An H. So this is like saying 3 times H. So I could put the decimal 00, or I could just leave it like this. But instead of using H, I'm going to use X for my independent. Okay? Plus 175.
When we write it in the blanks, we put the dollar sign.
No. When you do an equation, don't do dollar sign. Well, if you want to do it in the blanks, yes, you can. You can put them in the blanks. I just didn't. But when you're writing the equation, leave off the dollar signs. Okay? Okay. So what we're going to have to get used to is Y is going to be the dependent, X is going to be the independent. So instead of using a C for total cost, we used Y. Instead of using H for hour, we used X. And as you get on higher in math and stuff, you'll see that more often. So it'll become natural for you. Alright, so now we're going to use the equation and we're going to make the table. So where it says rule, right here, the rule is going to be this part of the equation right here. So my rule is 3 times x plus 1.75. So my input, remember, is my independent, and my output is my dependent. And if you look back at the very top of your paper, it says that. And that's why we have an X here, because my input is my X, my output is my Y. So say I wanted to put 1 hour in for X. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to say 3 times 1 plus 175. Well, 3 times 1 is 3. And 3 plus 175 would give me what? 475. So since this says cost, I am going to go ahead and put my dollar sign here. So when I put in 1 for X, I get $4.75 for Y. Okay? Alright, so when I put 2 in for X, so here instead of using a 1 or X or 1, I'm going to put in a 2. And the rest of it's the same. So my rule is still the same. It's still that equation to figure out what Y is going to be. So 3 times 2 is 6 plus 175 would be, you can go ahead and leave the dollar sign off this. You don't have to put the dollar sign yet. As long as because we can look up here and see that this is cost. It's got the dollar sign there.
I thought it was an 80.
No, it's a dollar sign. So yes, this is a dollar sign. Alright, so next we're going to put in 3 for X. So 3 times 3 plus 1.75. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 175 is 1075. And then next we put in 4 for x. So we're saying 3 times 4 plus 175. 3 times 4 is 12 plus 175 is 1375. Any questions on what we just did there? So remember, the input, that was our dependent variable. And the output was our, I got that backward, my bad. This is the independent. This is the dependent. Because the cost depends on what I put in. That's why this is input. My output is that dependent because I don't know my output without knowing my input. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, let's go to the next page. So on this one, it says that Jamal downloads songs to his MP3 player. Yeah, any of y'all know what an MP3 player is? Okay, just making sure that's still relevant. It was basically, you listen to music on it. The table shows how the time it takes him to download a song depends on the song's file size. We're going to write an equation for the relationship shown in the table. Then use the equation to find how many seconds it takes Jamal to download a song with a file size of, say, 7 megabytes. Alright, so we need to first off look for a pattern here. So this is my X, right? Which means that's the input. And this is my Y, which means this is my output. What am I having to do to my X each time to make it equal to the Y? What would I have to do to X to make it equal to Y? So let's just go ahead and put Y equals right here. What do I have to do here? Times 12. What about here? Does that work? Is 5 times 12 60? Is 6 times 12 72? Okay, so we're taking 12 and multiplying it by whatever X is, right? No matter what X is. So when we write our equation, we're saying 12 times X, which would be 12x. Do you understand why I didn't put in 4 or 5 or 6, 7 or 8? Because X represents the file size, so it depends on the file size. So this is the equation we use. And now that I've got that equation, I can go down here to 7 and figure out what Y would be. So I'm going to use my equation. I'm going to put Y equals X times, instead of, I'm sorry, I said X times, 12 times, instead of putting in X again, what would X be this time? It's going to be 7. So we're going to say 12 times 7, which would be what?
84.
So that means right up here, this would end up being 84. So 84 seconds for a 7 megabyte file. That's the download time. So if you wanted to write that like this, you would say 84 seconds. Any questions so far? Alright, so with that said, let's turn to page 347 in big red. You don't have to write anything else in your... No, hold up. You might end up needing your... No, you won't need your notebook. You can put your notebook to the side. So page 347. Page 347. Let's do some practice. Is everybody there? Alright, so on number 1, we've got to use the equation to complete the table. So here's our rule. Here's the equation. Here, this shows me that X is the input, Y is the output, and my rule is this part of the equation here, the X plus 3. So if they tell me that X is 6, and I put 6 in for X, then 6 plus 3 would be 9. Alright, so then when I put 8 in for X, 8 plus 3 is what?
11.
Okay, what am I going to put here? What am I putting in for x?
10 plus 3.
10. So 10 plus 3 would be
13.
13. So all we had to do there was complete the table. Alright, same thing on this one. We're going to complete the table. Now, notice they don't have that rule in the middle on this one. So that part we're going to kind of do over here to the side, okay? It's still important to do it, you just don't have to do it right there. So I have 2 times my x plus 1. 2 times x, I should have used a dot so you don't get confused with that x. I'll do that with the next one. So we're going to put in 4 where x was. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 would be 9. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to use a dot for multiplication instead of an x so it's not as confusing. For x, what am I going to put in? 7. So 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is 15. Alright, so the next one, 2 times what? 2 times 10 plus 1 is 21. Any questions about what we just did there? Make sure that if you get a table like this that doesn't have that middle column, make sure you on the side you go ahead and do it. You go ahead and write it out. Okay? Alright, so now the next one we've got to find the pattern to write the equation. And then we've got to tell the unknown value. So we're doing 2 things here. So if I'm looking, I know that my equation is going to be y equals. Okay? What do I have to do to my x's to make them equal to the y's? What would I do to 1 to make it equal to 6? Times 6. Does that work here? Is 2 times 6 12? Alright, so is 4 times 6 24? So we're taking our x's and multiplying by 6. So that means this would be y equals 6x. Okay, but then there's another question. It wants to know what's this unknown value. So if I put in 3 for x, what's y going to be? 18. So you just make sure that you are writing the equation and then solving for the unknown number. Okay? Alright, let's look at number 4. By the way, you see on this one how we went from a smaller number to a larger number? That means we would have either been adding or multiplying. Which we tried multiplying first and it worked. So that's why you want to try it with more than one problem. If you're going from, if your x is a larger number and your y is a smaller number, that means you're either going to be subtracting or dividing. So on this one, y equals. What do I have to do to this x to make it equal to my y? Subtract 5. Now let's try it for this one, make sure it works here. Is 11 minus 5 6? So I am taking the x and I'm subtracting 5. Okay? So now, if I put in 15 for x and I subtract 5, what do I get?
10.
So the missing number is 10 there. Just make sure you try it with more than one of the x values. Alright, so you're going to go ahead and you're going to complete the rest of 347, then bring it to me and let me check it.